thank you, Christina. I should say that I would have it no other way. The views are always just my own. Christina, thank you for that nice introduction. It's wonderful to be back in Estonia, to see old friends, new friends, and friends that I hope to make. I've been asked to address the issue of freeing human potential, and I'm reminded of the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He said, civil society is at the core of human nature. We learn together, pray together, sing together, and mourn together. And when we see injustice, we work together to make the world a better place. Archbishop Tutu noted the power of civil society in democratic transformations in the 90s. Think of Poland, South Africa, Mongolia, the list goes on and on. And civil society also ramped up its role in addressing issues of societal concern, whether the environment or education, humanitarian assistance, or human rights. And as we also know, Professor Les Solomon observed this trend in the 1990s. Professor Solomon actually came to Estonia, and he talked about the global associational revolution. But at the same time, we were, of course, witnessing a second revolution, the digital revolution. And while these are often considered to be distinct trends, they share an important commonality, because both civil society and the digital transformation enable citizens to connect, communicate, and to organize. And it's a particular honor to be able to address these two trends in the intersection here in Estonia. Now, it's well known Estonia's leadership on the digital transformation. Maybe it's less known Estonia's leadership when it comes to creating an enabling environment for civil society. Estonia was one of the first countries in the region to pass an enabling law on associations and foundations. They also worked on a civil society development concept enacted by the parliament. Both became models for countries around the world. And some of the amazing people that worked on those initiatives are with us today. Yes, Christina, yes, Leah, I'm looking at you. Thank you for what you've done to help promote an enabling environment for civil society, not only in Estonia, but also around the world. In the next few minutes, I will share a few observations from our partners around the world about the intersection of these two issues, civil society and the digital transformation. ICNL works in 100 countries on the legal framework for civil society and the digital transformation with 7,000 partners around the world. And there are 5 priorities that I'll mention. Each builds on what we've heard earlier today. First, inclusion. We know the data. According to the ITU, 2.6 billion people are disconnected from the internet. In low-income countries, only 17% of people in rural areas have internet access. And we often forget about persons with disabilities. They are one segment of society that can most benefit from emerging technology, though according to the data, they are the least likely to own smartphones or to be able to access digital technology. But it's not just these individuals. In every country, in every community, there are people who lack digital connectivity, devices, or skills. As a result, they're unable to access e-services, access educational opportunities, or online job postings from private employers, or exercise their rights online. So what do we need to do? We heard some ideas in the last panel, but we need to continue to prioritize digital inclusion. In other words, equitable, meaningful, and safe access to the digital transformation for everyone everywhere. But how do we accomplish that? We heard a few ideas in the last panel, but one of the key points, and Christina has mentioned this, is cross-sectoral cooperation. We need not only the engagement of government and tech companies, but also the engagement of civil society, of academia, and of the media. I mention this because on Tuesday I was talking to a high-level colleague who said that really what we need to do is focus on scale. We have to make sure that we get the vast majority of our people online, and then later on we'll deal with those who are excluded. But many of these people are already suffering from an equality gap. And if we focus just on others, we will end up intensifying inequality in the digital era. So the first issue, inclusion. Second, an issue we talked about in the last session, data protection. For people to feel comfortable engaging with e-services and the digital transformation, we need robust measures that deal with data retention, data minimization, and of course, cybersecurity. Over the weekend, I was in a country where they had a couple of data breaches, and you can now access through an Excel web sheet everyone's name, ID number, salary, employer, even their father's names, which is an identifier in that country, because they jumped very quickly to digitalization, e-governance without adequate cybersecurity in place. But it's not just the protection of government data that we need to worry about. I also want to bring high on the agenda the issue of the corporate sector. Fundamental decisions were made in the US in the 1990s about how social media would be funded. The decision would be made that they would be funded the same way that the US funds private media. How do they do that? For those of us who've been in the US, you know it's through advertising. It's through advertising. You've probably all heard of soap operas. Why were they called soap operas in the US? Because they were funded by soap companies. So we saw that one decision, focus on advertising. Second decision, light regulation. So that incentivized companies to have business models where at their core, they had data extraction and monetization for advertising purposes. And this has had a profound impact on a whole of society approach to services and to democracy. For example, in the US, there was a data broker who had collected location data on everyone who visited Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit that provides health and sexual health care in the United States. What was the cost to obtain the location and identifying information for everyone who visited Planned Parenthood in a week in the US? $160. Or think about Cambridge Analytica, which harvested the data of 87 million Facebook users to influence public opinion in over 200 countries. Yes, many countries have data protection laws, but as we discussed in the last session, more needs to be done to ensure that citizens have sovereignty over their own data, and this includes disrupting business models. For anybody who's interested, I'd be happy to talk more about that. 3, e-participation. We all know that digital tech has opened up new channels of communication with the public. We have in Korea, the People's Idea Box, Brazil, e-Democracia platform, and in Estonia, the Civic Initiatives platform. The key issue that our partners are raising is how to institutionalize these initiatives. Oftentimes they're a little bit ad hoc, standalone, they're pilots. How do we institutionalize them? Who owns them from the government perspective? Who funds them? And how do they fit within the constitutional framework of the country? If citizens are proposing new laws, how does that fit within the roles of the parliament and the executive branch? Taking it down one level, there's also a question about digital participation in lawmaking. This issue relates to inauthentic, bot-driven participation. In the US, as you know, we don't have an EID system. And the Federal Communications Commission had this open comment period about net true neutrality, and they found that they received 1 million comments generated by bots that sought to undermine the system there. We are now seeing a similar approach when it comes to access to information. Right now, election deniers in the US are producing access to information requests for election officials that overwhelm them so they can't actually do their day jobs. And we think that through the sort of ability to use generative AI, they'll be able to continue this at scale. So, issue 3, e-participation. 4, artificial intelligence. We've talked quite a bit about this, but I'll lift up just one set of issues, and that's how to promote people-centered, rights-based approaches to AI. And fortunately, there's some practical tools that can help. UNESCO has developed a framework for an ethical impact assessment of AI. We also have good initiatives in the Netherlands, New Zealand, and of course the EU. But this connects to another point. Many of these initiatives have transnational impact. For example, the UN is preparing a global digital compact, which includes an objective around emerging technology, including AI. But I saw an amazing statistic. The UN received 6,000 comments on the global digital compact. How many comments did they receive from African civil society? 8. We need to do a better job at decolonizing digital discussions and raising the voice of civil society from the global majority. And the 5th and final point relates to state surveillance. I know it's a difficult topic, but we need to address it. In some cases, it involves spyware like Pegasus, which has been used to surveil civil society, journalists, and human rights defenders around the world. But it's not just spyware. In Belarus, telecom operators and website owners must connect to state-designed systems that allow security officials to monitor what pages you visit, what posts you put in place, and what your location is based on GPS apps. China is exporting surveillance video equipment, which can be used to crack down on dissent, but this problem spans the political horizon. Yes, the impact is different, but in the US, they have something called Stingray tracking devices. This mimics cell phone towers to pick up signals from your phones so that they can mass surveil people in a particular area. But there are some positive examples. In Maryland, they've now outlawed Stingray technology. We have Catalonia implementing a moratorium on the use of spyware technology until they can ensure that there are human rights protections in place. And the Summit for Democracy launched an initiative where 17 governments have agreed to counter the proliferation and misuse of commercial spyware. In closing, I thank EJA for convening us and putting this issue on the agenda. I thank everyone who's joining us in person and online for your work on the digital transformation. We live in troubled times, but hearkening back to the words of Archbishop Tutu, good governance, civil society, and digital technology can help us influence the world around us. We have the power to influence history, and we'll do so together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug, for your inspirational and very lively speech. But now I think we need to engage the audience, right? Let's get seated, and I will come to some questions which I find in workshop. So the first one. Governments often introduce special laws for digital activities like engagement. Do you think these special laws regulating only the digital aspect are necessary?
That's a very nice question. So sometimes we do need some specific laws. Think of the area of data protection, AI governance. Some countries even have omnibus digital signature laws. I get that. Sometimes it'll just be an amendment to a specific law saying that you can submit your tax forms online, that too. But I think we have to be careful about overestimating the impact of a law. We're often approached by governments and sometimes civil society saying, we have a problem with participation in our country. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass a law on digital participation. That never works. It never works. Why? Because what we see is that there's usually some root cause problems. And so what we suggest is going back and doing contextual analysis where you might figure out who's participating, who's not participating, and why. For those who participate, do they find it useful? From the government side, when they receive participation, do they find it useful? Are there spaces where people are already participating? If so, do you actually double down on those, or do you need to create something new? Only then can we figure out, is there a problem to be solved through law? There's a saying by Peter Drucker, at least attributed to him, that in the business sector, culture eats strategy for breakfast. When it comes to participation, culture eats law for lunch.
Well, I so much like how you put it. Well, we have actually another question, of course, related to that civic space and engagement of people are crucial for modern societies, as we all know. And we hope digital transformation will foster openness and prosperity. From your experience, Doug, how is the legal environment of civic space evolving in this digital age, becoming more open or more restrictive?
Great question. So it depends on the country, of course, as almost everything does. But if you look at the life cycle of organizations, let's start with the ability to form or register an organization. We see some amazing impact, including here in Estonia, that have facilitated that process. In Estonia, you can establish an association probably in about 22 minutes, certainly within 5 days. That's the legal period to do so. That's a true innovation, the ability to enter civic space in a timely and efficient manner. Let's look at issues around fundraising. A number of countries have adopted crowdfunding or online fundraising laws, which have facilitated the ability of civil society to access resources. Even Morocco recently passed a law on that. And similarly, of course, we see issues around the ability of civil society to engage their communities, particularly during the pandemic, around these issues. On the other hand, we're also seeing some governments that are restricting that space, making it harder to set up organizations. They outlaw the ability to call for demonstrations online. We even work in a country where it's illegal to criticize the president online. So we have to be really careful because I think it's not closing civic space, but shifting civic space.
Thank you so much. Well, sorry that time is flying, and we once again we thank you very much, Doug, for your wonderful presentation and elaborating on this topic. And with that, I kindly invite you for a big applause for Doug. Thank you.
Thank you.